Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton, and I am here with a man who is even more obscure than Scott Vander Ploeg.
What you're going to have to
even more unheralded. And if you don't know who Eric is, or you don't know who Scott Vander Ploeg is, this is indeed the podcast.
All right,
for you.
You know what? We're gonna do a little experiment. We'll once this goes up, I will promote this podcast every day.
Okay, great.
For 7 days.
Every day for 7 days.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful.
7 days straight.
Sweet.
You will see this on some social media feed.
Wow, this is a new level for Eric. Well, the discussion is really about discipleship, leadership development, the church community, the making of priests. That's the discussion. I'm kind of in interview mode with Eric here, though I step up on the soapbox from
Yeah,
you
got me the soapbox.
I love it. That was the point. So I hope everyone enjoys. When I think of soapboxes, I think of little tiny boxes with soap in them. So it's really not that crazy.
No.
But enjoy.
No.
Sing an intro. Hi, Eric. We are talking about leadership and discipleship because I've been at the Multiply conference, and I had said... I had suggested somewhere that you should have been speaking at it, and you just acknowledged it probably wasn't your
cup of tea, as I have it.
And you have a cup of tea, and I have a cup of coffee, so
Yeah.
Yep. It all adds up. The vibe in here is
the
vibe. So but I still think you should have. I think you should have been there because I do think you are very good at discipleship, and you think about leadership and discipleship, and you have a different angle on it, and I wish your voice would have been there. So my goal on this podcast is to introduce you to some folks, because though, as Paul Vanderklay has said, Scott Vander Ploeg is the most powerful leader in the CRC that nobody's heard of. I think
who is this man you speak of?
Scott Vander Ploeg?
Yeah, let's start there.
Well, Scott Vander Ploeg is the pastor of Sunlight, a church in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and there's some plants off of it, and there's a really great video by Paul Vanderklay called Scott Vander Ploeg is the most, it's a long title. It won't even fit on the screen. If you want to really know all kinds of cool history and the history of the large and mega church movement in the Christian Reformed Church, and how Scott is part of that, but a little bit different, and the unique dynamics that brought him to be able to lead a church, one of the rare churches in that area that survived and turned it around after a lot of decline. You can go watch Paul's video, but Paul says that he's the most powerful leader in the CRC, or something like that nobody's ever heard of. And I think I don't know, I wouldn't give you that title. I wouldn't contend that, no, Eric Siepen is the most powerful leader you've never heard of. But he's definitely more obscure than Scott Vander Ploeg.
I would say that I am the leader behind the curtain of the Tucson leaders of the CRC. So
he has Ozzing tendencies.
I am the Wizard of Oz.
Wow. The fact that you've self-disclosed that is different than the Wizard of Oz.
It is. But
this is a new wizard.
This is the wicked version.
The wicked version. Oh, God. Okay. Interesting. So I wanted to share your thoughts with some of these Multiply people. So
all right.
That's my goal.
So you're going to have to help me.
You have a goal. Okay. So Multiply Conference. The idea was to hear what's going on in the Christian Reformed Church. I know not all of our listeners give a rip about the Christian Reformed Church, and that's fine. That's because I think these are thoughts that a lot of declining groups of Christians need to be thinking about. That's the same that I think Paul Vanderklay would say. there have been a lot of changes, a lot of hard times in a group like the Christian Reformed Church. And so this was meant to say, hey, so no matter what we would do, if we are to go on and have a role in the future, we need to be developing leaders. And to develop leaders, people need to be discipled. So let's talk about how that's being done and try to inspire more of that. Okay. Right. So there were a number of people sharing a number of approaches to that. I was invited to be a part of that, really kind of representing the Rod Hugan Wednesday breakfast model of sit with people, no agenda, let the Spirit guide over long periods of time. Of course, you have shaped that in many ways, and Rod has shaped you in many ways. So I am the younger voice to that, who was at this conference, and I brought Cruz and Justin along. So I was there to represent that angle of things. But the host church, Sunlight, was very much the platformed church. I mean, of course, they hosted it. It was, in fact, their idea to do this. And their model is far more structured. They have a leadership or a discipleship pathway called 222 discipleship. They even have now a seminary wing of it that's tied to Calvin. It requires a lot of commitment. They're a structured set of things. A person is led through those things. They commit to go and meet with somebody and lead them through it. So it's meant to multiply immediately. In fact, if they do not commit to that, they just don't do the program. The program is only open to those who are willing to replicate it and share. And they have seen a lot of leaders develop there. And there were, I'm sure, various thoughts on that. I think some people walked away inspired and said, we're going to do that. Some walked away and went, okay, some of that I liked, some of that I'm a little uncomfortable with. Others probably walked away and said, I'm not doing that. But I hope people walked away and said they are going to do something, and that one of the approaches was helpful. And I think at the end of the day, Scott and those folks just wanted people to invest in making disciples. If that happens, that's great. But yeah, your angle on that. I was thinking about this actually yesterday because I filled out some questions because I'm in a follow-up group after it, and they were asking us questions about what is a disciple and what are some of the principles for making disciples. And I didn't put long answers. I gave short answers, but I was thinking a lot more about people's stories with God, the biblical story, people's stories. I was thinking a lot about inner life. I was thinking about where's the intersection of like potentially these people have traumas and stuff, and I thought this is coming from Eric. This is coming from the influence of Eric and his parents in my life to think about this in connection to discipleship. And I'm curious how much other people would have thought of that. And you've formed a community here at the Village that I think in some ways is the antithesis of what we saw at Sunlight, but you have some characteristics that are similar. And the antithesis would be it doesn't feel like a tight program and an exact amount of studies and people replicate the exact same things. But you have very specific ways you do things here. And people who become a part of the Village, as we were just discussing pre-podcast, I think are, though you don't say you have to commit to this, doing it exactly this way, there is really only one way you do it at the Village. And if you enter into the Village, that is what you will do to some degree. So I see a combination of the antithesis and similarity in you. And I want to hear more about that, Eric. So there's my preamble. Folks, are you with me? Don't you want to hear what the great man behind the curtain
the great Oz
is doing behind that curtain? Let's find out.
Wow. Well, first I just want to say thank you for actually wanting to know what I think. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I feel encouraged, important, thought about by Andy, at least.
Hey.
One person in this world
Absolutely
thinks about me outside of my wife.
There's two of us, Eric.
Yeah,
at least.
It's amazing.
At least.
So I will preface this with, you'll get the I'm still recovering from a cold version of all of this, but
so he sounds deeper and more thoughtful than usual.
And so probably, even though I do a little work to deal with the drops up and down on our podcast, because my voice gets so deep in the morning. Sometimes when even I'm listening, I'm like, what?
Who is that guy?
Who is that guy? What's he saying?
I attribute the success of our podcast to you sounding deeper.
Than I really am.
That's why we meet in the morning.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's a couple of things I'll just shoot out first, and it's discipleship principles. My guess is that if I were to go to this church that you're talking about and who was holding the conference, and I did some personality tests, that the majority of the people who fit into their discipleship model are type A people.
Okay.
Type A people tend to be attracted to that kind of model. It's all, and so that's where you're going to get. So when you're making disciples, what you're doing is you're making disciples of one kind of person, and the church has done that in the last 30 to 40 years, 50 years. Is that type A person is the person we're looking for in leadership, because accomplishment and completing things and doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Is
productivity.
Thank you. That's a one word to describe what I just said.
Doing a lot of stuff.
Productivity is highly valued.
Yeah.
Right. So
really quick on that. I remember years ago when I was first meeting with Rod, I had a sincere question for him, and I said, how do you invest in a future elder when they're a very creative person? And he just laughed. And I think it's because I was already getting, my core was not type A's.
Yes. Right. So the thing is, the majority of people who will sit in your pew are not type A.
Yeah.
They actually probably are somewhere in the middle to less, right? And so they probably are even more introverted at some level in their relational style. So it means that relational capacity is going to be less.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they don't have capacities, because they do. They just exercise them much differently. So that's my first thing, is just like, great discipleship program, somewhat exclusive to a particular personality type.
Another thing, and just so you can factor this in if it fits, Rod had me read a book called The Search to Belong. Have you read that one?
Yes, he and I
read it together.
Went to a conference and met the author.
And I thought the insight that I gleaned from it was he was talking about discipleship or belonging being offered in only one way, and how people genuinely experience belonging in multiple ways. And so he talked about at a house, you would have the level of relationship you might have on the front porch, the living room, the kitchen, etc. And he suggested that every community needed to think about and offer discipleship, belonging in each of those spaces.
Yes.
In order to truly serve a whole community. You might have thoughts on that. Anyway.
Well, no, that is definitely the model in which the village rests.
And we have been implementing some of that at Mission this year. But so that kind of factors in too. There's one type of person. Some communities might really, really invest in one type of person because it fits this model well. What happens when you do that?
One type of person that fits the model well.
Are the other type of people still there? They just don't feel like they have as much of a role, or do they kind of go elsewhere?
I think both. They just begin to become, at some level, sound weird, like consumers of whatever's there, and instead of givers, in the sense that they'll contributors, I guess. But then also they'll develop their own kind of private way of dealing with like discipleship, or they'll just feel like they never belong anywhere. Yeah. So I think that's just part of the deal. So one of the things in that book that always struck me is he tells a story about receiving a large amount of money from a woman who passed away,
who had never been to the church?
But
yes.
considered that to be her church. And it was because I think, if I remember right, it's been a long time since I've read this book, that the church had cared well for her son or something, or lived next to them.
There was something in the community where she just felt a lot of peace and connection to it because it was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it was her church, she said, and she gave her money to that when she passed away. It's an interesting thing. So you can't really gauge how people understand their connectedness. So that's one thing. So the second thing is, like, one of the fascinating things to me is that there are different kinds of leaders that we see put up in front of us, but we're not invited to be one version of them. So you put somebody like a Rick Warren out, right? But also put him out in front of us is Henry Nouwen.
Yeah.
One is a monk who wrote lots of books and often was cloistered and didn't have a congregation.
Spent the end of his career with those with disabilities in relative obscurity.
Right. The other, who is, God gifted and up in front of a lot of people and influencing people. And we look at that guy who God has blessed, and it's great. And we say we all want to be like that. Like, we're going to follow Rick Warren. But,
or we might even say that is leadership.
Yeah. But Rick Warren will then reflect on Henry Nouwen and what he's offered him. Right. So but the reality is, you have Rick Warrens and Henry Nouwens in your congregation.
Right. And
each needs a different kind of discipleship, and each is called to a different place.
Yeah. And
each is in a different stage. So there's that part. The other part is, I think it's really hard to get out of this sort of product-oriented discipleship where everybody, like, there's a discipleship model, like you buy the book, you do the program, everybody does 40 days of purpose, or you do, some Bible study kind of thing. You have a system, right? And the system is very much, it can be purchased, or it's very tightly done. So it's very difficult for people to have a holistic discipleship.
Now, why would somebody even want to get out? I think a number of people at this conference were like, we don't have anything going for discipleship. Please give us a product. You're talking about moving beyond that or something. Why would you even consider moving beyond that if that's something you're aspiring to right now?
Oh, you mean moving beyond the product?
Yeah.
Well, my answer, if I had been at the conference, is, why don't you build your own product? Like, why do you need, like, are you that inept at studying the Bible and Scripture and putting things together that you can't do that?
I am, Eric. Yes.
Well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
You need to actually, then as a disciple person, you might need to get some, I don't know. Like,
is that ineptitude, or is that being part of the body of Christ, that some people build the product and you utilize it? Is that, I'm struggling a little bit with ineptitude.
I know, I was harsh. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way.
This is why we keep you behind the curtain.
I did mean it, and I am sorry. And I should not have said. No, it's like, here's what I'm thinking. It's like, this is why I don't have anything against mega churches, but why I'm so pro small churches is that small churches, if they are healthy, allow people you get to have the gifting of the community really be needed. And it allows us not to always say that the most polished, most expert is what we're going to utilize as the thing that we all worship to and listen to and are trained in.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. So in our church, we decided we're going to shift our 3 to 8 year old curriculum.
Yeah.
And we decided to shift it from the Jesus Storybook Bible, which we've been using for a very long time, to N.T. Wright's Storybook Bible.
Okay. A
couple of reasons. One, he has shorter pages. Two, he doesn't skip the real crazy stuff within the Bible. So we're going to do that. We decide to do that, and then a young woman on her own initiative reads it, loves it, starts reading it over and over again, and decides to build a curriculum on her own. We didn't ask her to. She just decides to do it. She's like, I would like to do this. Can I do it? Boom. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
And she's been building it, and it's beautiful. It's completely, you're talking about 150 lessons that she's building all the crafts for and doing all the stuff, and she's in and invested in it. You couldn't do that at a larger church, but her gift gets to come up to the surface, and it's highly valued.
And from what I know of the Village, for those who are less familiar with Eric, the church is the Village community in Tucson, Arizona. You, I think, would integrate the idea of discipleship into all sorts of things, like those who cook, those who might just kind of sit and tell stories outside after church, those who engage with their neighbors on the porch. I was asked to give that definition of discipleship, and I think I knew what the question was, and I'm not entirely against it. You know me, Mr. Both and. Frustratingly so, right? But I'm not against a book. I'm not against anything. I mean, even The Search to Belong, we just referenced. Here's a guy's book. We both read it.
Yeah.
It made an impact. But sometimes, so I would say I said something from the stage about my discipleship methods because I asked Cruz and Justin, and they said some kind of funny things, but they were serious. Cruz said, anytime I go to the dump, I bring him with me. And part of that's because I need somebody to help me at the dump, but also I'm like, hey, I got to drive a truck for 45 minutes that way, unload it, and drive it 45 minutes this way. Come talk to me while I do it. I once heard that about John Piper. He would always bring somebody with him when he got dropped off to the airport for the sake of having a conversation in the car.
Right.
Traveling with people. I took Justin and Cruz on this is their second trip together. When you travel with someone, you get to know them, but they get to watch you. So Justin and Cruz got to experience me. I drove to the wrong church and had to reorient and get back on track. I forgot my passport and had to figure that out. Who I really am is going to come out in those moments. Who I am as a disciple is going to come out. And when I think about some of the things I've learned from people, it's been watching one of my most profound stories. One of the megachurch pastors in Tucson, I knew who he was. He was at McDonald's. And I saw him as a kid, and he spilled his beverage onto a woman. And she was just angry and just kind of snapped at him. And it was a total accident on his behalf, but he just said, I am so sorry. How that was so inconsiderate. Grabbed some napkins, helped clean her up. And I just watched him respond with mercy and kindness in the face of being accused. That was the most powerful thing he ever taught me. I heard many sermons. I remember very little to nothing, but I have never forgotten that moment. And so sometimes I think discipleship is described as the tools, but I think it's the time. I think it's the way I described it at our church one time was walking with somebody who's trying to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what do you think about those? Is that a false dichotomy? Is there?
No, I think it's good. I mean, I think life on life relationship, having an open home, all those kinds of things are good. If you want me to really talk about the theory, I do. The theory of discipleship. So one of the things, and I wrote this to my leaders recently, because I was talking about administration. Because Rod used to make this joke in front, that the Village is terrible at administration. Yeah. And it would always make me laugh because he and I both lived a life before the Village where administration was highly necessary and we were relied on as being administrators. And I'm a really good administrator. Yeah. I'm very good and highly gifted at it. And it's why the Village works the way it works, is because of how good of an administrator is. I know how to administrate chaos and make it work. And that probably brings up the question of, does administration always look the same? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really kind of understood this even more when one of the people in our church, Larry Axon, came up to me, and he's a man who's been in lots of different business worlds and all that kind of stuff. And he said, Eric, I've watched you for a long time. And what I've realized is that every single thing you do where you sit, the way you move, the way you say is all planned out and thought through meticulously in order to achieve a goal at the village.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
In order to so part of, I think, of discipleship is that whoever is discipling has to have a really robust understanding of what it means to help people grow in Christ. So that's part of it. The second part of it is that I think, because I have a pretty strong background in education and I used to be a basketball coach, that I am fascinated with like martial arts. So these kinds of things all play into how I understand discipleship.
I think about sport team dynamics all the time. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
So what I've learned is that people are super complex and like complexity, but in general, they need simplicity. And my experience of growing up in the church, so I've grown up in a lot of different kinds of churches, like highly theological churches where the sermons are like the John Piper level sermons. I've been in the churches where they're much more like seeker sensitive and they're like the more,
small groups are where we got to get people to go deep.
4 steps to getting this, and more driven towards behavior modification and life change and real simple steps. I've been in all of them. What I found in the highly theological ones is that people aren't actually that theologically astute.
Okay.
Because it doesn't actually train them.
The theology isn't changing behavior. You're saying?
No.
Yeah.
So there's a super group of people who love it, and it's there. But what you find is a group of people who are in love with learning, but not necessarily with knowing. And acting on what they know. And on the other one, there's sort of this like obsession with like the next new way of doing something. And so, but when I learned in basketball is that I could take a group of, and this is my favorite, like I could take a group of 7th and 8th graders, teach them the basics.
Yeah.
So instead of, and teach us one kind of way of doing something. So teach them one very simple offense that we learn over and over and over and over again, but that has these things that they don't realize in it that allows for free form.
Yeah.
That produces this beauty, right? So we learn these basics over and over again. Same with defense. We're not going to have tons of defenses. We'll lose, but we're sticking to our defense. We're not going to make a change. Because we're going to have most of our success there. Then I can take them, and I did, and put them in whoa. I just spilled the tea everywhere.
Keep talking.
Anyway, there's a towel over there. I'm sorry about that. I spilled tea. But what I learned is I could move those kids up to a freshman league, and we could have success playing against older people and older kids. And part of that is because they just knew what to do, and they could do these things, and they did them really well. And so when I think about the village, for me, I want to just have we have these things that are really important to us. We're going to practice them over and over again. And then everybody will start to realize that they can improvise.
Right.
And then and they can bring their voice to it. So so for us, a lot of that has to do with, you know what? This is the way that we do discipleship within groups. We have some form of scripture. Usually it's taught through a simple, very simple inductive method. Here's how we do our soul care. Here's how we do relational care, and we call it the hot seat. Here's how we do prayer. It's called Trinitarian prayer. These are the things we're going to learn. Everybody's going to learn them. Everybody's going to know them. Not everybody's going to like them, but you're going to be able to improvise off of them. You're going to be able to do your own thing around them. Do villagers do that? Yeah, I hear the reports all the time, even sometimes frustrating to me.
Yeah.
How much improvisation happens.
Yeah.
Right? But, when we do our music, we had particular principles about how the music was to be done, partly because we had a value on creativity and mission. So now, we have 100 plus songs that have been written. Do I like all the songs? Of course not. They're like half the ones I've written. But they're allow people a freedom to improvise around certain sets of rules that we've set that we repeat over and over again. if you ask any of the original musicians, what's our policy? Our policy is unhindered by quality control. Why? Because we want people to learn. In order to learn, you're going to have to mess up. It's not going to always be good.
And you have to try things, yeah.
Yeah, well, this last Sunday was a perfect example. In the morning, a lot of really well-seasoned, musicians. The music sounded pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Evening, there's a couple people learning instruments. Not played the same songs. It sounded very different.
Yeah.
Good. In fact, the evening people enjoyed it, I think, more and
Yeah.
worshipped and sang top of their lungs and were just having a great time. Because they're excited to see someone learning and being part of the process. And that's even more worshipful than having, like high-level sax player up there.
So a couple of, I want to dive into two of those things, I think. Number one, the soul care stuff. So that's something that at this conference I heard none of it. And that's not a criticism. It's normal. That's typical.
Right.
These two things are separate. There's like, you could go to a conference on Christian counseling or soul care.
Right.
You'd go to one on discipleship. They're usually separated. You do not do that.
No.
Talk to me about that.
Well, because, we partly come from the school of Dr. Larry Crabb, so we believe that all people are trained all Christians are called to be priests. And so we're in priest training. That's the other thing, is the priesthood of all believers. I don't believe we're making disciples. I get the word disciple, follower, learner, but I would like to argue that we're forming priests. And when you form a priest, you have to form someone who knows how to bind up wounds, and knows their scriptures well, knows how to pray, knows how to laugh, knows how to do all the kinds of things that
rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep.
You got to do those things. You got to act out Romans 12 in a lot of ways. So you're training those people. That means they've got to learn how to ask good questions. They need to know how to go to the hospital. In fact, I will tell you this, and I think my church would tell you this too. My church is way better at being chaplains in the hospital than I am. They're there before I get there.
Yeah.
They've prayed over people in more powerful ways than I have, because they're well-trained priests.
Yeah.
And they know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so, but a lot of that, so that's one thing. I think the other thing is we just believe so much in elders discipling people and pastors discipling people, all people.
Yeah.
Right. So I meet with people all across the spectrum. I'm doing, I'm memorizing scripture and doing an introduction to the faith Bible studies with one person. I'm walking along another person who's, is working in another ministry who goes to my church, and I'm helping them think through all those kinds of things. And we're in equivalent kind of positions.
Yeah.
I'm helping people walk through their marriage. I'm doing pre-marriage counseling. I'm doing training of leaders and just trying to support them in what they're doing, and helping them in their life so that they can effectively help other people in their life. So some are intense in scripture, some are just us talking and praying. So I'm investing, and then I'm having those people in my home, and having other people in my home, and then Mark's doing that, and Daniel's doing that, and other leaders are doing that. So it's part of there isn't I signed up for the program.
Yeah.
Our disciple, you want to sign up for the program, you volunteer to hang out with the kids, to clean the dishes, to cook for the church, clean the church, do the soundboard, run the church. That's part of discipleship, running a Sunday, because it's family for us. We eat together. It's two big meals happen.
I think that's the other piece I want to talk about, is that whole life integration piece, because that's the other. I just had asked about soul care being separated from discipleship, but the other thing I would say is people might separate. There's discipleship, and then there's your Christian life, as if those are two things. Like, your Christian life might mean your ethics at work. It might mean your home life. It might mean whether or not you know how to do the dishes or whatever.
Sure.
And then discipleship tends to be things you know about God. Why do you integrate them? Why don't you keep them nice and tidy and separate? Why does that matter to you? Why is doing the dishes discipleship?
Because it's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus was doing normal life, and his disciples went with him and did normal life, and then he would stop and teach them. And
how critical to those teachings were the normal life? Like, okay, this would be so Jesus teaches them there's a bird in the field, and he points to it and says, observe the bird, right? Should he have just planned that with a lesson plan, or must you do the real life to actually know what lesson needs to be taught? I mean, Jesus is on another level, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak against training.
No, we both of us engage in. We've created curriculums and models, right? Yeah.
I think that the way education is done, people don't really learn a lot from the student model.
Yeah.
You might do like Bible study fellowship. I mean, the funny thing is I've talked to people who've gone through Bible study fellowship for years, and they know, it seems that maybe they know a lot, but maybe they don't. And because it's the way we acquire and knowledge and things like that, where I'm just like, I don't know. This is not as effective. So, but the bird, they won't forget the bird. They won't forget the bird story that Jesus told.
Like, I didn't forget what I saw in that McDonald's.
Yeah. So one other thing, though, is and this is you'll find this in the Village, is that because I come from an education space, I don't think you should pretty much say the same thing from the pulpit every 3 years. Like, you need to just be repeating yourself over and over and over again until people can repeat what you're saying. So, and that was not my experience growing up in church. I was not being trained from the pulpit, and I wasn't foundations per se were not being built.
Yeah.
And I would argue with those who say you should spend 3 years from the pulpit in Romans, phrase by phrase.
Sorry, Martin Lloyd-Jones.
Yes.
Yeah. He's not here to defend himself.
Yeah, no, or Piper or any of the other guys. Yeah, I don't see the benefit.
Yeah.
I don't. People are not able to articulate Christian life and what Scripture is inviting them to live out and have a healthy engagement with the Holy Spirit.
Now, one of the things I think I'm getting a little bit better at that I'm learning is that whatever you teach, though, you can say the same things. Like, you can have undergirding principles that are really important to you. So my only pushback on that would be, I think you could have a 3-year sermon series in Romans if the integral things that you wanted to teach were repeated within it. That's my take. Then
my pushback on it is, then why spend 3 years?
I'm not spending 3 years in Romans.
Yeah.
But the point is that if the Bible is a unified story, if these things are applicable all across. I mean, I remember one guy years ago said to me, I feel like I'm getting the same message from you every time, that like everything in the Old Testament is like pointing to Jesus. And I kind of chuckled because I was like, yeah. I mean, we were doing an Old Testament series for the year. I was like, that is the thing that a lot of people don't see when they approach the Bible, especially if they're coming from outside the church. So absolutely, we are saying that over and over and over and over and over. So anyway, I think those two can go together. You could choose to do next year. You could choose to go through the epistles of Paul, but you could still teach over and over some of the discipleship core that you have been teaching for years.
Yeah. I also think disciple. So I think discipleship is got to be really thought well out, and it has to be a cultural. Like, you need to know. Like, the thing that was revolutionary to me when we planted the church was that the church planting models that were being presented to us in the missional movement in its newness, and in the emerging church movement, was that your sermons and your worship music needs to tell the story of your local community.
Right.
It needs to be helping the people understand who they are in their local community and who Jesus is to them and what he's inviting them to do. Not necessarily connected to the larger story, though you can connect it to the larger story, but because, your sermons can't just be, here's the truths from Scripture, now go act on them. You've got to put it into the story. It needs to be real to the people and what they're suffering with. Right? So if you've got a lot of young couples who are getting married and having kids, then there's this joy that you're going to be talking to, and the sorrow of the barren person and the person who's not married yet. So you're trying to tell that story and help people understand what that looks like to live in community together, but also to be on mission together.
And I think there's some real validity to that. I think what that group might have lost was the tie to the bigger narrative that's actually very anchoring and unifying. And that's one thing that's being examined now. That's I think one of the many reasons behind all the interest in the old traditions and stuff like that.
Sure. But out of that came the ancient future faith. Like, that wasn't part. In that you don't need to preach John Piper's sermon, because John Piper is preaching to John Piper's people.
You need to preach to your church. I see and agree with that.
And you need to learn to be tell their story, not just tell stories from your life, but to be able to help them understand who they are. So that's why, you'll hear at the Village, we have all these descriptors, we're healing the city one person at a time. We're a neo-monastic mega house church, and then we break that out for you and tell you why and what that means, and we're telling our story.
Yeah.
How did it happen? How did the news people find us? What happened here? What was, what's our experience in this? How is Jesus moving us? How does the text apply to us and what God's calling us to do and be?
Final element here. You once put on a conference for discipleship and invited people from the denomination.
Yeah, we did.
A few came. And I came to most of it. And I think that one of the things I thought about when I left was similar to what I just thought about regarding the Florida churches and Multiply, which is where I thought, so this is really you.
Yep.
And I don't think I can just layer this or just take this I'm borrowing your Legos and go build with them at my church. But at the same time, I was shaped by it, because there were things about what you did that challenged me and made me think and made me maybe go think, what's our version of this? Mm-hmm. So what's the value in teaching one church's way?
Well, I would argue that that's the beauty of the Village way, and this is where I actually think it's better.
Okay. Yeah. Bring it on.
Because it's not, you should write your own music, or you should be a monastic this, or you should even have meals afterwards. Right. I think the real thing is that the Village way says, we value everyone. We believe that God brought all of us together into this local body, and the gifts that exist here, the longings, the thoughts, the creativity, that's supposed to shape who we are.
Yeah.
And so, can you disciple this group of people to live into their talents and gifts? That's going to look very different.
Yeah.
But I don't think the teaching is necessarily different. I think you're still teaching people to be priests.
Yeah.
In their context and in their culture. And everybody's context and culture is different.
Yeah.
But again, you also have to then locate the sin of your congregation. So is consumerism, Is busyness? What are the things that you're going to be trying to help shape out of them so that they can be a body that brings those things to bear? So it's going to look different, but I think it's always about doing missionary work in your congregation and helping them grow into themselves and inviting them to be what God's called them to be. Which means you have to deconstruct. If you've got a lot of people who've been following Jesus for a while, in some ways you got to deconstruct Christian culture.
Yeah.
Because Christian culture is what you're discipling people out of.
I've seen that more than I expected.
Yeah. That's part of discipleship of people who've been following Jesus for a while. People who haven't been following Jesus for a while, actually, it's interesting to me because they love the village, those who've come to Christ at the village, but they also kind of are like, this Christian culture thing's kind of cool too. Like they are able to, I think, have a healthy balance between the two and understand the values of them.
Yeah. Just to add one more piece to that, I think because sometimes Christian culture in a person's mind can be what Christianity is, and that's not necessarily true. Like the experience of Christian culture that you had isn't necessarily Christianity. It's a culture with a lot of Christian stuff attached.
Right.
Sometimes the Christian stuff is just reinforcing the cultural narrative, actually. Sometimes the Christian story of Christmas is reinforcing the consumerism idol. And you have to look at that, and that can be a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah. I think I would recommend, if you just want to see what do you mean by Christian culture, I think you should go pick up the book, The Great Sex Rescue, and pick up the book, The Myth of Christian Parenting. Both are surveys of the literature over the last 50 years and what that literature is communicating. Yeah. It is both are very devastating reads, and to begin to help you understand what is kind of what I would think the insidious part of Christian culture and what is happened to us over the last 50 years that's not healthy. And I think that's what we're discipling people out of. And some of it is helping people move through the trauma of Christian culture. To a different kind of relationship with Jesus that I think is actually healthier. Now, as fallen people, we're culture builders. So
there will be something wrong with what we offer.
Yes, there always will be some broken part of the culture. Yeah. But hopefully you build into your culture a humility. Yeah. And then maybe you can make those changes along the road.
Well, the Multiply Conference was connected to the Reformed Church, and that is a church whose story says reform is needed. Yeah. Which means the culture that was attached to Christianity at one time, we acknowledge, needed to be reformed. Right. It's possible it might be a more ongoing thing. Okay. I think that's
I don't know if I gave
that's a discussion.
Is that what you wanted?
Eric, it's never exactly what I wanted, but sometimes you give me things I wasn't even looking for, and that's part of the joy of hanging out with you, man. If you had given me what I wanted, that would be very programmatic and really would violate both of our principles. So that's not the point. All right. Okay. You're making me a little bit better priest. Thank you.
No, good.
Well, thanks for tuning in. If you have a question, maybe you have a follow-up question on that, maybe you have a follow-up question about anything else, you can, in mini text app or podcast apps, you can just text us your question, and we really love that. You could disagree with this. You could give us something to respond to. You could ask for more. You can email us, faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. You can give us a rating or review. That makes a huge difference in us getting discovered by the various world markets that we are yet to tap, and we appreciate all of that. Eric also probably has a message about how you can monetarily support us. He normally does because he's a disciple maker, and he I know nothing today.
I just like if you like us,
you give
I
some
hope
money.
That you'll support us.
Yeah, okay, I like that. Yeah, The truth is, we're just trying to pay the fees. That's our goal. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.
Yep. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.